carry it to the conference room. John, the manager from our client company, threw a suitcase at me and sneered as he spoke. I was impressed that he could throw it since it was heavy with all its contents. I caught the suitcase and placed it on the floor. I'm not tolerant enough to let it slide when I know I'm being harassed. So I decided to embarrass him. Oh, by the way, I haven't told you yet, but I've become the CEO. Is it okay to have this kind of exchange in front of other employees? They're getting worried. John stared at me with eyes as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. From now on, he's going to face hell. My name is Mike. I'm in my 40s, but not a typical office worker. I work as the CEO of a jewelry manufacturing company. The reason I decided to work for this company is due to something that happened when I was a kid. My mom and I had a very romantic relationship, my dad would often say. Yes, we did. We started talking a lot at work, realized we had the same interests, and felt we were destined for each other. Isn't that wonderful? My parents used to work at the same jewelry store when they were young. They found out they had the same birthstone and started dating. I heard this story so often I could have grown ears of corn listening to it. Their closeness was almost ridiculous, but it piqued my interest. I thought it was wonderful to be part of someone's happy life-changing moment, so I dreamed of working in a jewelry company. That's why I joined a jewelry manufacturing company in my 20s, and after various experiences, I am now the CEO. When I was a young employee, there was a time when an infectious disease spread within the company, causing a severe staff shortage. During that time, I helped out in various departments, which caught the attention of my predecessor. Since you've interacted with many employees and earned their trust, I have no objections to you becoming CEO. That's how I became the CEO a few years later. Leading a company and guiding its employees comes with huge responsibilities. However, the sense of fulfillment grows proportionally with the weight of the responsibility. Therefore, I want to continue working as the CEO. I remember my childhood friend John saying, "When I grow up, I'm going to start a huge company and do something no one has ever done." He was the same age as me, and we were often in the same class in elementary school. He came from a wealthy family and was smart, making many people envious of his home life. Receiving a business call from John filled me with nostalgia. I'm looking forward to meeting him again and continue my daily work with anticipation. In the scorching summer heat exceeding 86 degrees Fahrenheit, I arrived at work and thought about various things while doing paperwork in the CEO's office. Since becoming the CEO, I haven't been late to work, but today I was almost late. That's because I was excited to meet my childhood friend, John, again. I wonder what kind of adult John has become. I heard he works at a major jewelry retail company. He seems busy every day as the head of the sales department. When I received that message from one of the sales staff, I was working in the CEO's office, letting my imagination run wild. When he was a kid, he was small and thin, so I wonder if he still has that kind of build. Also, John had terrible fashion sense, so I wonder how that's going. I had so many thoughts that I couldn't concentrate on my work. However, there's one thing that worries me. He didn't eat well when he was a kid, so I'm a bit concerned about his health. I hope that's not still the case. On top of that, John was a picky eater. Even when I brought leftovers from home, he didn't eat much. Talking to myself, I pulled myself together and pushed aside the distracting thoughts. I tried to focus on the paperwork, but I kept thinking about John. The company John works for is opening a new jewelry store. They're currently in the process of selecting the jewelry to be handled at the new store. So, they're contacting various companies, and I'm glad they reached out to my company. Knowing that a major company is taking notice makes me want to work harder, even on routine tasks. I wonder how he's doing at work. He seems to be doing well as a sales department member, but I'd like to see him and talk. Sighing and talking to myself, I leaned on my desk, thinking it was bad manners. I might have reverted to a bit of a childlike state while reminiscing about the past. Yeah, if I'm gonna see him, I should bring something he likes as a gift. Normally, the sales department would handle this, but I decided that I personally greet new business partners. These kinds of things are important for being remembered and making a good impression. Especially since my company isn't a big one, I should do everything I can. The air conditioning cooled the room and caused the wind chime near the window to sway. Listening to its refreshing sound, I checked my schedule. There was a good day a week later, so I decided to visit him then. We sometimes fought, had things hidden or broken, and were mean to each other, but I considered John a friend. So, I was looking forward to seeing him. A week later, I brought a lot of chocolate treats as gifts and headed to the company. They were all John's favorites. He loved sweets, especially chocolate. If his tastes hadn't changed since childhood, he'd appreciate them. I hoped he'd be happy as I arrived at the company and gave my name at the reception desk, then waited for a while. There was a chair nearby, so I sat down and waited quietly. Being near the entrance of the building, the hot air from outside came in, but I endured it. Maybe John was busy. Work must be really tough for him. Being a manager at a big company, it can't be helped. I muttered to myself, trying to convince myself. After waiting for about an hour in the high temperature, I was finally led to the reception room. As I entered the air-conditioned room, I couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. I settled into a soft sofa and took the coffee brought by the office lady, but I was a bit surprised to find it was hot coffee. Usually, you'd get a cold drink in this situation, but maybe they were too busy and made a mistake. After waiting for a few minutes, wiping my sweat, John arrived. It seemed he didn't immediately recognize me as his childhood friend. "Thank you for coming in this heat," he said with a rather annoyed expression as he sat on the sofa in the reception room. But after a few seconds, he seemed to notice something and stared at my face. "Excuse me, but have we met somewhere before?" He was probably trying to recall someone from his memory. I wanted John to remember, so I didn't introduce myself and spoke to him like I used to. "Long time no see, John. Do you still like chocolate? I brought some as a gift, hoping you wouldn't dislike this brand." I pointed to the gift with my eyes as I spoke. Then John exclaimed, "Oh," and looked at me with a surprised expression. "Are you Mike? The one who used to call me weird nicknames like Johnny Boy?" "Yeah, I remember that. And I also called you Skinny, didn't I?" The first nickname was a play on his name, and the second was because he was so thin. Hearing this, John blushed and started to get angry. "Because you always called me that. Other kids started calling me those names too. You should be sorry." My bad, my bad." I couldn't help but laugh at the nostalgic conversation we had as kids. John then began to talk about his current situation. He is now working hard as a manager in the sales department. Apparently, his job is going smoothly, and he's earning a good salary. To prove it, he showed off several branded items he was wearing. The items he boasted about were from famous brands that many people know. I was pretty well off as a kid, but now I'm living an even more affluent life. In addition, the house he recently built is quite spacious, and his wife is beautiful. He also has a few pets, Labrador Retriever puppies, and his private life seems fulfilling. He showed me pictures on his smartphone, and indeed, there were cute puppies and his beautiful wife. There were also photos of his elderly parents smiling with John. "And you're probably still sweating it out as a regular employee, right? Unlike you, a nobody. I've succeeded this much. I even got promoted to manager in just a few years. How does that make you feel? Jealous?" I had become the CEO of a company, but it was just a stroke of luck. However, John probably got his current position through his own ability. Despite his slightly difficult personality and high pride, he is smart, and his grades were always good when we were kids. "John, you're amazing. You always ace the tests back in school. At this rate, you might achieve things no one else can." I sincerely thought it was wonderful and offered my praise, but for some reason, John glared at me. "Be more jealous. My life is so fulfilling now. Compared to me, your suit, bag, and shoes are all ordinary. Even your watch looks like something from a regular store." As John said that, I looked over myself. Indeed, he was right. but I had no complaints about it. Working in a jewelry manufacturing company, it's not uncommon for large sums of money to be involved. Sometimes, a single transaction can bring in significant revenue. But I never thought about indulging in luxury. I prefer to save money or take my parents on trips rather than splurge on such things. Of course, I don't deny other people's values, and I think it's fine to live a life fulfilled by purchasing branded items. Anyway, how about this gift? I put a lot of thought into choosing it. Remembering the gift during the pause in our conversation, I handed it to John. John, who had been frowning for a while, opened the gift and checked the contents, taking out the chocolate sweets. "Humph, you seem to have a knack for pleasing people. These are hard to get without lining up early in the morning." He unwrapped the package and started eating on the spot, seemingly liking the chocolate sweets. I was relieved that his taste hadn't changed. Watching him stuff his mouth and chew, I was reminded of the scenes during school lunch. He was so obsessed with food that he would get angry if other students tried to take his lunch. Just as I was about to ask John about his home life, someone knocked on the door. Mr. John, may I have a moment? It's about the suitcase you requested. I brought the one that was in front of your locker." "All right. Come in, put it in the corner, and get back to work quickly." The person who called out was an ordinary male employee. He brought the suitcase into the room, placed it by the wall, and left immediately. I asked John, "Are you going on a trip?" Then John replied to my question with a smirk. "Yeah, I'm going on an overseas trip. I'll be staying in Hawaii for a week." "I bet you can't afford to go to places like that, can you?" I wanted to say that's not true, but before I could open my mouth, John started talking about all sorts of things. "I've been to France, the UK, Korea, and China. I've seen lots of tourist spots and eaten a lot of delicious food." "Wow, that's great. Did you take any pictures? Show them to me." I genuinely thought it was a good thing and didn't take his words as boasting. So I honestly praised him. However, it seemed John didn't expect such a reaction, and his mouth twisted into a frown. "Enough. You've always been insensitive to these things. The conversation is over. I'm heading to the airport now, so you carry my suitcase." "Hey, wait a minute." John stood up angrily and quickly left the room. After talking more, I found out he was planning to go on a trip on paid leave starting tomorrow. He said he was going to leave work early and head to the airport, traveling abroad alone. He came to work today but planned to take the afternoon off, pretending to be sick. That's why he brought his suitcase to the office this morning. So, there would be no point in going to the airport without his suitcase. Maybe he wanted to extend our conversation a bit longer by making me carry it. Thinking that, I grabbed the heavy suitcase and followed him. Dragging the suitcase along the hallway, we passed by a room that looked like an auditorium. It seemed like a meeting had just ended, as many employees were coming out of the room. It's been a while since we had a meeting with all the staff. Yeah, about 6 months. With typhoon season coming, disaster preparedness must be important. Apparently, the meeting in the auditorium was about something crucial. Indeed, typhoon preparedness is a significant issue in our company. Last year, a signboard blown by the wind pierced the warehouse wall. The wooden structure was already in bad shape, so we properly renovated the building, but I realized it's tough for everyone. Actually, last year, a hanger blown by the wind broke our department's window. They must think disaster preparedness is essential. I need to check the screens. Looks like a busy day. And our sales manager is going on a trip. That slacker. I wish someone would deal with him. It's annoying having to entertain him, even on our days off. Distracted by the employees walking and talking in the hallway, I was suddenly yelled at by John, who had turned red with anger. "Hurry up and bring the suitcase." Given the current context, it seemed natural for him to get angry at his subordinates, but he didn't seem to think that way. Of course, if he actually did something like that, I would stop him. But it seemed dealing with his feelings towards me was a higher priority for him. "You're slow. If you were one of my employees, you wouldn't be causing me this much trouble. You're so sluggish." John snatched the suitcase from my hand then noticed a call on his phone. Irritated, he answered and shouted, "The conference room? I left the charm on the desk. I can't believe I forgot it. Must have been during that meeting an hour ago. What's up? Need me to go get it for you?" I asked. "No, I'll get it myself. But yeah, you can at least come to the room's entrance." John took a deep breath, then raised his voice a notch. "Walk it over to the conference room." He threw the suitcase back at me and mockingly laughed. Despite its heavy contents, he managed to throw it, which impressed me. I caught the suitcase and placed it on the floor. I remembered how, as a kid, he got incredibly strong when he was angry. He used to say he did some strength training out of boredom at home, but he only ever seemed to show off his strength to me. When he got upset, he would throw things or sometimes raise his hand at me. Thinking this over, I finally realized that John was angry. He used to say things like this to me when we were kids. "You're so clueless, bullying you isn't even fun." So now, I figured I had done something to anger John, leading to this petty act of making me carry his heavy suitcase. Realizing the truth, I felt exasperated. Even as adults, our relationship hadn't changed. I still found myself tolerating his antics. However, I wasn't about to let this slide without doing anything. So, I decided to make him feel embarrassed. "Hey, Mr. John, doesn't he know who that person is? That guy's the CEO of another company, right? Doesn't he realize?" With the surrounding employees looking pale, I decided to speak my words of payback. "By the way, John, I hadn't told you yet, but I became a CEO. Is it really okay to treat me like this in front of your employees? They're starting to worry." Hearing the murmurs of the employees in my words, John looked at me as if he couldn't believe it. "You're a CEO? No way. You're saying you're above me?" He yelled and tried to shove me, but the employees around us held him back. Still, he struggled to get closer. "You've been lying to me. I never liked you from the start. No matter how much I teased you, you never cared and just kept acting like my friend." It seemed John had been holding a grudge against me since childhood. "You always pitied me because I was born into a wealthy family and would share your meals with me. You, from an ordinary family. It made me so mad." Perhaps my well-intentioned actions had hurt him more than I realized. I felt a bit sorry, but I didn't do it for no reason. I acted that way because he seemed to need it. "You were always alone, even in the evenings, not eating dinner at home, just sitting on the swing in the park." John's eyes widened in surprise at my words. Seeing that he no longer tried to hit me, the employees who had been holding him back stepped away. Some of them started dispersing the other employees who were watching. Feeling grateful for my perceptive subordinates, I continued speaking to John. "I heard you mutter that being alone wasn't fun and that you wanted someone to play with. I accidentally overheard when I left my ball at the park once." John looked flustered, his gaze wavering. He muttered softly, "I didn't say that," but his lack of confidence made it clear he was lying. "Even though your family was wealthy, they never bought you new clothes or shoes, right? So you sometimes picked out nice clothes from the neighboring town's trash, didn't you?" His terrible fashion sense was a result of that. Mixing and matching clothes he found in the trash always made him look weird. "How do you know that?" "A relative who lived in the neighboring town told me." John held his head in his hands and crouched down on the spot. Looking around, he saw the last slow-moving employees finally leaving the area. John must have already felt embarrassed, but I didn't stop talking. There was more I wanted to say. "You rarely got to eat sweets, so whenever chocolate bread came up in school lunch, you got really excited. You probably thought you were hiding it, but I noticed. Having a childhood fact exposed in your 40s must be tough." John seemed shocked and his thoughts came to a halt. Crouching down, he didn't say a word or move an inch. Eventually, he sat down, hugging his knees, looking down. "I also know you secretly took in a Labrador Retriever puppy abandoned by the river, but you couldn't feed it or afford treatment for its injuries, so it died. Other kids knew about that too." John didn't have many friends, and it was rare to see him being kind to anyone, so everyone was surprised. If that puppy had been a clean pet from a normal home, he probably wouldn't have cared. It was a pitiful puppy that couldn't be with its mother, so maybe he saw himself in it. Then I remembered the conversation we had in the office. John mentioned he has a pet now, and I thought maybe it was out of regret, because the breed he mentioned was the same as that abandoned puppy. Stop. Don't talk about the stains on my life anymore. I didn't lead such a miserable life. I've lived a life of success that everyone envies. John, holding his head, clearly didn't want to recall his childhood. But I had to delve a bit deeper. By continuing to cover up your past, you're still trapped by it even now. I don't hold any grudge for what he did to me. Getting bullied as a kid was common, and I felt sorry for him, so I didn't care much. People often called me naive, and I was often oblivious to pranks played on me. But others aren't like that. If you treat others like you treat me, you'll lose allies in no time. I don't know your usual behavior, but aren't you harassing your subordinates? John answered that question with silence. Ever since he was a kid, he would clam up whenever something inconvenient happened, so it's highly likely he had been involved in some wrongdoing. I sighed inwardly. You should properly apologize to them. The people in this company seem like good folks. If you sincerely apologize from the bottom of your heart, they'll surely accept it, I said gently, placing my hand on his shoulder. However, my words didn't seem to reach him, as he angrily brushed my hand away. I can't do that. No way, he shouted. There's no way you can't. You won't know until you try. If you sincerely apologize, you'll get a good result. That's impossible. I know without even trying. How could someone like you understand how I feel? He spat out the words and grabbed my arm as he stood up. It would have been better if you had just given up. Then I could have easily cut ties with you. Why do you always say such nice things and try to be helpful? And why are you the CEO when you're poorer and dumber than me? John shouted, tears of frustration streaming down his face. He was likely lamenting his own inadequacy. He probably thought he should change but couldn't manage it. You hate yourself for not being able to change, don't you? But John, you can do it. I'll keep saying it because we're friends. Do you really think I can change, even now? Yeah, you can. When I extended my hand to the tearful John, he lifted his head and started to cry. I couldn't help but think about what two grown men were doing, crying in the company hallway. But no matter how awkward or embarrassing it might be, I believe it's important to stand up and move forward. Later, the company's CEO, who had heard the commotion, came to find out what was going on. Since John wouldn't open his mouth, I ended up explaining everything. He seemed to want to change, but couldn't do it immediately. We were let off with a warning since it was just a personal quarrel without any real damage, but there were issues with his usual work behavior. Many people witnessed the argument, so we had to investigate. During that process, we found out John had been doing whatever he wanted. After the company investigation, John was sternly reprimanded by the CEO and the executives. It must have been quite a blow because he later emailed me, venting his frustrations. Apologizing to people is really tough. I almost reflexively make excuses, he wrote. After our argument, we exchanged contact infos and have been in touch regularly. But the messages I received were mostly complaints from John. By the way, the trip we had planned was, of course, canceled. John said he brought the suitcase back home without using it. After our argument, he apparently cut ties with his parents. They had been kind to him when he started earning money, but such relationships are obviously strained. When John said he was cutting ties, his parents wanted to keep the connection, but after a lot of arguing, they stopped being a family. During all the commotion, I can never forget the voice of John, calling me while sneering at himself. I thought if I kept sending money, my parents might start to feel like parents, but nothing changed. To them, I was neither a child nor a person, just a wallet. All I could say to him was, "Your biological parents aren't everything." If John weren't married, his mental state would have been in serious trouble. Thankfully, his wife seemed to support him well through this ordeal. By the way, he apparently properly apologized to his subordinates. He had been doing all sorts of things, like giving them tasks unrelated to work and making them work during breaks. Some employees resisted and hurled angry words at him, but John seemed determined to accept those voices. Because of all this, I had postponed dealings with John's company. Considering his department was probably in turmoil, I thought it wasn't the right time for business discussions. However, after about a month, things seemed to calm down. We resumed business negotiations and ended up signing a contract. I wasn't involved in that matter due to other work, but from what our sales department employees told me, things were going well. Just when I thought everything was settled, something unexpected came to light. It happened when John invited me to dinner, and he showed me a stone he called his lucky charm. I was surprised because it was the birthday present I had given him. It's a citrine gem. I don't know who gave it to me, but it was left in my mailbox when I was a kid. I always thought it was from the prom queen back then. No, I gave that to you. I asked my parents what would be a good gift for you, and they suggested a gemstone that would suit you. If I remember correctly, it was just before his birthday. I saw John feeling down and wanted to cheer him up with a special present, so I consulted my parents. They worked at a jewelry store back then and gave me good advice, which I followed. The stone, citrine, is said to bring wealth and prosperity. So it was you. Why do you have to be involved in every important part of my life? Well, I can't help it. It's normal to want to cheer up a friend who's feeling down. We argued over trivial things for a while, then laughed together. This relationship was unimaginable back when we were at odds. If John hadn't decided to change, this scene wouldn't exist. I wasn't dissatisfied with our previous relationship. I didn't really mind his harassment, but I believe our current relationship is much better. Even after that, John was still cursed at and faced retaliation from some of his subordinates for a while. But he accepted all the punishment and kept apologizing. His sincere remorse seemed to get through, and the harassment gradually stopped. A few months later, I decided to take a trip with my parents during a long vacation. So you're taking us on a trip. If we're going, it should be near the jewelry shop where I met your mom. And don't forget, I must stay in the same room as your mom. Don't mess up the reservation. Oh honey, stop it. By the way, there was an amusement park near there, wasn't there? We should stay for more than a day since one day won't be enough. But maybe the three of us should share a room, my mom added. Mom, I think Dad just wants to have some alone time with you. Don't disappoint him too much with your obliviousness. While chatting with my family and picking out possible destinations, I'm still undecided on where to go. My mom often takes the conversation in unexpected directions due to her airheadedness, but seeing these interactions makes me feel the strong bond we share. I'm sure it will be a fun trip. Work is going pretty well. The company is growing steadily, with business performance on an upward trend. Our reputation is gradually increasing too. As the company expands, we are slowly increasing the number of employees. However, recently, a young male employee from a poor family background has been standing out. Like John, he seems to have a lot of pride and works tirelessly every day in the product design department, aiming for a promotion. He has a few shortcomings, such as being a bit clumsy compared to others, but his jewelry design skills are solid. It saddens me that some employees look down on him for being poor or clumsy. No matter the reason, one should never judge or look down on others based on their own standards. In my company, I want to ensure that no one belittles others or harasses them based on superiority or inferiority. As the CEO, I plan to strictly reprimand anyone who does so. Of course, if the young employee's pride causes issues, I will scold him just the same. I will continue to work hard to make our workplace comfortable for everyone.